This should be fun. Let's see. I'm gonna grab this so I can check. Earlier today. Wait, no, that's not what I want. So working correctly. Yes, it is. Excellent. No, don't do that. Jeez. You know, sometimes my phone gets really difficult, and I feel like it just is ignoring my deep desires, even though I feel like I'm communicating through my thumb what I would like it to do. And then it's just like, nah, I don't want to.
It's just hesitating. It's just having a hard time.
Yeah. It's like, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Anyway, all right. That'll work. Excellent. So you ready for me to hit record?
Oh, let's do it, dude.
Oh yeah. And
oh, Jack, I love you. Me and Jack went to high school together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Watch out. Well, in that case, he's got stories. Don't think about the crazy ones while you're trying to drive. All righty. Oh yeah. I'm gonna hit it again, Nick, because you know those people that aren't watching the video, they don't know that your beard is on Durin, and you know you have a tank top on. There's some chest hair coming out, so the double the air horn.
Oh, yes.
And your buddy Jack is on trying to drive. I hope he's not looking at the video, getting distracted by your strap endurance status.
I mean, this is double air horn chest hair, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nick's got that Durin beard. And it is time for, guess what? It's the halftime report from Rings of Power. Oh, yeah. I'm excited. And look, we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about the different big themes and such going through it, give our initial assessments and stuff. And then at the end, we'll probably remind you of what's coming up in the next few weeks. We have next week, Brian Zahn is coming on to talk Tolkien and such with us. Donna Bowman is coming on. And who is the other person we were messaging back? Nick.
I've messaged them and TBD.
We don't have a
TBD.
Okay.
We'll sprinkle it. It's a little teaser.
Hush, hush, hush. Secrets. And remember, we are going to be hanging out together, some of us, in person when the last episode of Rings of Power comes out. We'll be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at Theology Beer Camp. And if you're coming, then you will not only get to stream that episode and have fun with us, but you'll also be able to put in your pipe Old Toby's blend. I got blend version number 4 today. Tested it out professionally with my brother, who's
professionally.
Yeah, he's a long time pipe smoker. You know, it not only tasted good, smoked well, but the conversation over it, high quality. Then we went to go get lunch, pick up one of the kids from school together. What was in the passenger seat when I got in? The Silmarillion.
Oh.
Yeah. He's like, no, I've been enjoying the class and things, and I've never got into this. I've never read the Silmarillion before. I've read Lord of the Rings, and this, you know, if you're in my family, I peer pressured quite a few of them. My dad is currently reading Lord of the Rings for the first time all the way through.
That's what we want. That's what we want. That's the dream.
Yeah. All right, Nick. So I'm going to ask you a few questions before we dig in and look at the story. And then anyone that's listening live and things, if you have questions and such, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll see them and dig in at the end. If we collect any of the questions, we'll put them there. I've got ones people emailed in, but if you did email them in, you can still put them in the chat so that I can bring them up on the thing, which you can't do unless I just cut and paste your questions in. But then it'd be like I'm asking myself a question. So, all right. So now you and I were both cautiously optimistic coming in, fearful
Right.
that Rings of Power was going to not be a net positive experience for Tolkien super nerds. And so knowing your cautious optimism, how are you feeling? Where are you now? 4 episodes, halfway through season 1 of 5 in Rings of Power, Nick.
Dude, I've been just absolutely elated. I mean, especially when we went to Numenor and just have seen it fleshed out. Like I'm in Middle Earth. Like it is like everything that like when you see the Shire in the Peter Jackson movies and you're like, oh, that's the Shire. That's what it's always been. I'm going to the Shire. When you see Numenor, you're like, oh yeah, that's Numenor. That's always been Numenor in my head. And so it's just an amazing show. Now there's some nitpicky things because I am a nerd. There's some nitpicky things, but overall, I mean, your brother's reading the Silmarillion for the first time, and your dad's reading Lord of the Rings for the first time. And I mean, that is just Tolkien. It makes my Tolkien evangelist heart happy. So,
Ooh. All right. So like, what is your Nico Tomato rating?
this is my inaugural Nico Mado rating ever. You know, I'm gonna give it a 85 out of 100. You know, I'll give it an 88. I'll give it an 88.
Ooh, there you go. There you go. Well,
now, what about you? What about you?
I'm okay. So I've watched every episode 3 times.
Yeah,
I listened to the soundtrack, and it's wonderful. I'm getting to talk to you every week, and amazing Tolkien nerds. So I have a hard time giving an objective assessment.
Yeah.
And I was really worried it was going to be horrible.
Right.
I mean, my fear was that it was going to flop like the Lakers when they got Russell Westbrook. Now, I am a huge Laker fan, and you get Russell Westbrook, and you're like, wow, this is less defense and less 3-point shooting and another person that needs the ball, but he's also a former MVP. I don't know. I'm uncomfortable. And it was bad. So I had the, what is Amazon going to do with this? They got the money. And the more I heard, I'm like, okay, it's not going to be horrible.
Right.
And then once I started seeing the tweets from people that saw the first episode that were Tolkien nerds, I was like, okay, all right. I can get when the Neil Gaiman's like, if you like Tolkien, you're going to like this. I was like, oh, okay, I can exhale. And now I've just really enjoyed it. Yeah, there are things like I could, complain about, but it's like, why would you do that? Couldn't you get to watch Middle Earth like on your screen? And it's like just so like it's like if you've read it enough and dreamed about Middle Earth.
Oh yeah,
this is what it's like. And so and I like actually am enjoying a lot of the characters that you've never met before in it.
Oh yeah,
like
Arondir has been my favorite so far. Like out of the whole show, Arondir is my favorite.
And I just I'm thrilled. Okay, so now before we go into looking at some of the plot lines, the characters and parts of the book, the movie or TV show, broadly, which of those big themes as a Tolkien head that are part of the larger legendarium are you really digging the way the show is playing with it? Like if people are new, like I've talked to a bunch of people who they've seen the movies or whatever, they started watching the show. I watch it at least 3 times each week, sometimes with people that are more or less familiar with it. And I like ask questions. They're like, are you doing this to talk about me on your podcast? Yes, but I won't use your name. I love it when the things they're interested in are, like big Tolkien themes. So I wondered if there was any particular theme running through it that like you're just like, oh yeah, I dig that.
Oh man, that is such a good question, because I think that's the best thing about the show, honestly, is just the Tolkien themes that just are around every little detail in the show is just so apparent, and you could just tell the love was just poured into every inch of that show. And one of the big ones for me is that the small have a huge part to play in the larger scheme of things. And then even like each individual tasks is like creates a domino effect, so that um you know, I'm trying to think, like when I'm thinking about the Lord of the Rings, when the hobbits get captured by the Barrow Wights, and then Merry ends up with the cool sword and works with Eowyn to kill the Witch King. Couldn't have happened without them being kidnapped by the Barrow Wights and then being saved by Tom Bombadil. Would not have happened. And so they're already, in the fourth episode, they're already playing with that a little bit in a tragic sense and in an ironic sense, where, the Queen Regent Muriel has said she had a dream in the Palantir about Galadriel, and she's like, the doom of Numenor happens when you arrive, and now I'm going to send you away. And we ultimately know what's going to happen in Numenor. So I've been loving this.
Oh yeah, yeah. Everything's going to work out grand. There definitely will be a place that's completely Sauron free for all eternity.
Yeah. The next level of Numenor's evolution in society. Yeah.
Yeah. So how's it been as someone who is familiar with so much of the larger kind of legendarium stuff around Numenor and things that are a lot bigger than what people may know if they just have read The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings and have no clue what's going on in when they all hang out in Elrond's castle in the middle of the whole Rivendell singing the histories bit in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Like, so if are there like knowing that a lot of people are being introduced to the larger legendarium, how have you felt about the way they've nuanced it? And obviously the way they got rights plays a part in it, but I've seen wide ranging takes on whether or not the show's getting the vibe. I wondered if you like how you see it, especially thinking of the kind of conversations you mentioned last week having with students and stuff that that didn't know who they were talking to.
Yeah, right. I mean, the one thing that is great about Lord of the Rings and, the Legendarium and the part that we are at now, which for those who are here, the Legendarium is the world that Tolkien created, known as Middle Earth. And, it just contains multitudes. I mean, even over time, up to Tolkien's death, he kept editing his work. Like, he was trying to create an updated Lord of the Rings so that he could then publish it again to fix all of his little problems, quote unquote, that he saw. And so, even so one of my biggest things is Galadriel's character. There's 4 or 5 different accounts of Galadriel's characters in different ages throughout the story. So we have young Galadriel, we have older Galadriel, we have wise Galadriel, we have hot-headed Galadriel. And the Galadriel that I'm familiar with in my headcanon has been more akin to the one in the books and in the Peter Jackson films. And so me seeing Galadriel get hot-headed doesn't feel like Galadriel to me, but I know that is still in line with Tolkien's works. And so for people who are coming in, they're like, I don't understand these characters. Like, if I come back to read the Silmarillion, how am I going to keep the story straight? And I think that in watching this, there's so much to it, and there's so much to Tolkien that it's really hard to get lost, in the sense that you're going to stray away from Tolkien. You may get lost and you still stumble upon Tolkien.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that it showed up in 2 different conversations I've had with people that have read a word of Tolkien and have watched all the movies and that kind of stuff. In two of those conversations, the thing that was present in what they've experienced before that's still in this and is so Tolkien is the role of friendship across difference.
Oh yeah.
And they harped on that. And the thing they didn't have much reference for that's play here is the role of death in the Legendarium, because you get the movies don't really spend the time thinking about the different relationships that dwarves and humans and elves have to death, let alone like once you throw in Numenorians and like unless you watch the extended edition, you don't know how old Aragorn is. Like, right, you know, right. So like there's this there's like all these layers that you could have loved the movies and cry at parts and are moved by it. That this show starts to give infrastructure for people that either that reading's not their thing, they don't have the time, maybe they have a lot of small children or whatnot, and they haven't ever had the chance to sit and read. Now I feel like it resonates with those parts that were done really well in the movie, like the friendships type of thing, the friendship across difference and all that kind of stuff. But then it's also peeling out layers that for those that have loved reading deeply in Tolkien are there, like questions around death that don't get picked up in the same way in the movies, or sometimes they move stuff in the movies. And you have Gandalf spilling the beans on what happens post-mortem in the middle in the middle of the battle. So yeah, I mean, that's like those two things have been showed up in multiple conversations, and I thought, okay, like I'm now having more fun Tolkien conversations with people that haven't read it, and they're the kind that Tolkien would want you to have.
Absolutely. Like I think what the show is setting itself up to do, and I hadn't really thought about it until you talked about the show capturing those themes. When you read the Silmarillion and all the other stuff, it really does kind of enrich your return back to the Lord of the Rings. You know, if you're reading and you're like, oh man, this death or this battle means so much because it harkens back to this. And for people who don't have time to read or not, or, you know, maybe even people I've heard with certain disabilities who can't read, who read audiobooks or what have you, but can watch movies. I think the show is going to set up for people to kind of enrich their maybe return to the Peter Jackson films in a way that normally wouldn't have been there.
All right. I got sent by Paula, member of the group.
Paula.
I knew you have to pick 3 options. So this is no longer who are you going to go to Pound Town with at the Prancing Pony in the liquid consumption site, and which I would mean you don't have to pick just one if you come to Theology Beer Camp. It can be everyone there. Or who you're going to battle with at Sidekick at Helm's Deep, or go to Mordor with. These are 3 scenes. Like, which scene gives you this response in the first 4 episodes? And I said, oh, this is fun. So I'll give you the so we get 1 is the all junk, which I was like, all right, the yikes. And then that's badass. So that's badass, all junk in the yikes scene from the first 4 episodes. So which one you want to go first? We could both give ours for each as we go through, because then we'll help each other think of which one we'll pick. But when I was looking through the questions people sent, I was like, this is fun. So which is your aw junk scene where you're like, oh, okay. I use the phrase aw junk, like that's so awesome, I'm super pumped. And like, oh yeah, all junk, which I realize, and I've been picked on this in the homebrewed community group. They're like, why do you say all junk about things that are really cool? So I think Paul is trolling me by saying the all junk.
I love that she used it, because I've heard you on the podcast say odd junk, and I know what you mean. There's a couple things I used to say when I was in high school. When something was cool, I would say that's raw. like RAW, and
Ooh.
people would be like, raw. Like no one knew. And then when I came to college and started saying it, no one had any idea. And then I did not, it left my vocabulary.
Well, we can reclaim it. But
Yeah.
when you think of the show, the aw junk moment so far, where are you going?
Two things. So, because it's hard to pick just one. Jack confirms that I did say it. That's wrong. The first episode when we see Elrond, Chillin, and Lindon, like for people who don't, Lindon is like the last standing kingdom in Middle Earth after the First Age, and is like the pre-Lothlorien. And so to see Elrond as like a young, aspiring leader in this beautiful Elvish landscape, writing in Elvish, speaking in Elvish is like, it was amazing. And then number two is when they arrive in Numenor. Like that, just when they're on the boat, they clear the arches, you see the statues, you see the statue of Eärendil, and it's just, the music, everything.
Look, I understand those, but the number one adjunct scene has to be these dwarves singing in the mountain.
Yeah.
And it gets to that echo, and that scene is so good, right? So the singing is actually started before you get the film cut over to the dwarves. And so you think this is just the orchestral background. And then in fact, you're like, no, it really is singing. And then Disa gets like the harmonics or whatever resonating with the mountain. I was like, man, that's like when your church rents a choir and some brass on Easter, and they do like the Hallelujah chorus, and it's on point. From Handel's Messiah, the Hallelujah chorus. Anyway, that's one of those people, like if it's popping, it's popping.
Like people are given that love offering. They are sending that choir away with some cash. Like.
And I mean, I had that response the first time you go right, like into the mountain, and you see all this kind of stuff, and you're just sitting there with your like the Gimli voice that they call this a mind in your head, and you're like, oh, this is so good. It is. It's awesome. All right. So what was the yikes moment? The yikes where something's going down. You're like, yikes.
Oh, we're talking like creepy yikes?
Yikes. No, like yikes, like, maybe this isn't going good. I don't know about this. Well, yikes.
Oh, I see.
Like, for example, I don't know, when Galadriel rides a horse, and I've just never seen anyone that excited to ride a horse. I was like, yikes. And now I get what was trying to be communicated, and the kind of freedom that's there, connection to nature, all these kinds of things. That's great. It's just, I think I prefer her brooding, angry face to happy joy riding on horse face. And maybe that's why they're going that way with the character, Nick. If you considered that, if you're comparing how she does this an actress when like brooding anger and just like I'm running roughshod over these humans and stuff, you're like, versus I'm just smitten on a horse.
Yeah.
I was like, somebody gave her some like elvish edibles. She had more than some lambus, and she was just having herself a good time on the horse. She
really was.
Yeah. So I think that would be my yikes moment.
Okay. Yeah. It felt a little cringe. It did feel a little cringe. I think for me, some of the Harfoot stuff feels a little yikes to me. Especially like I like how they're fleshing out the Harfoot culture, but when they're doing like the little ritual, recognizing people they left behind, like I think the actual ritual is pretty cool. But man, I think just like the ruthlessness of just like laughing, where like when they're talking, it was a funny scene where they're talking about that one guy who died by bees, and they're like, he was kind of an idiot though, and everyone's like, ha 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 ha. Like, dang, yeah. It's funny. I just I think
didn't have Benadryl back then.
Yeah, that's true. You just you're gone. Yeah,
It's like having peanuts at a preschool. Like, how did they survive?
That's at a preschool. I'm using that. And I think it's hard for me to divide the established Shire than from like the nomadic, like pre-Hobbit tribes, peoples. So that's a little yikes, but that's a personal thing. I don't think it's anything that I'm like, that's wrong. It just doesn't. I just haven't really liked it.
Yeah. Well, and bath time with Vaughn. I agree in some sense, and this is true, like anthropologically, that like nomadic communities had come up with ways of ritualizing that when the survival of the whole requires a kind of action. Then what do you do with the memory? Right, like if you take that they're nomadic and go in season to season to areas where they know how to like live off the land and that kind of stuff, prior to the stranger who's obviously the blue wizard is going to help them, learn how to grow in the Shire or whatever.
I don't know, man. I don't know if it's the blue wizard now.
We'll get there. Yeah, we haven't got there yet. I'm just saying, like I actually like how we've seen rituals from each culture.
Oh yeah.
And in that ritual, I think shows you like a culture that comes out of that and finds a home where those kind of relationships don't have to take place. I think it's that like you can get how if they finally settled and they got to have a tree where they named out the names under it and they gathered there for marriages and birthdays and this kind of thing, like why the Harfoots, if eventually hobbits and such would like totally like cherish their home in the kind of deep ways that when we meet Mary and Sam and Frodo and all that, like you're like, oh, okay, there you go. But anyway, the now the badass scene, which scene where you were like, oh yeah, I mean, we don't have Legolas surfing while shooting arrows, but we do have an elf that catches an arrow in mid-flight in slow motion while jumping, turns and shoots. And I want you to know, as a father to a 14-year-old, I'm pretty sure that would have qualified as the badass scene and the all junk scene if you were Elgin. You're just like, oh, junk. I knew he liked it so much that Haven, the 5-year-old, told me today that he actually, in slow motion, caught a Nerf dart that Elgin shot and loaded it in his gun and shot the dart back. And there's no way he like Haven has any reference for this, because he I thought, oh, he might be able to watch it, and that was before I met the wargs, and I was like, yeah, it's definitely eating guts out of an elf, the Chihuahua warg. And so it had to be good enough that a brother tells another brother, you gotta check this out.
Dude, I love that.
So be like, was it watched on YouTube? on our check our YouTube history. Yeah.
I think Mark is too late. Mark said, just hope your kid doesn't want to practice that move. It's already happened.
Not with a real arrow, just with Nerf darts. Darts. He is learning to shoot a bow at targets. So
nice. We'll as Elgin or Haven?
Elgin. The 14-year-old is he's going with grandfather to learn to shoot and things. I have a horrible stigmatism, and I shouldn't, because I can't shoot straight. And so the rest of my family all did that growing up, hunting and things, and I just fished.
Yeah.
And I like deer. So
fishing's more casual anyway. So it's more fun. You can chill, have a conversation, not scare off the deer.
Yeah, and if you get older, you can drink and smoke while you have like a big cigar, and sit there with your drink and talk Tolkien to your parents now that they're all reading Lord of the Rings. That's what. Anyway, your badass scene, Elgin's.
Was that your bad? Yours was not. That was Elgin's. Was that your badass scene?
Well, I think that has to be one of the most popular But I think the rock crushing competition, because that was like the most dwarf thing.
Yeah.
And then Elrond kind of throwing it, knowing like I have to give him a good show, and then I have to actually lose for my friend. And so it had like this crazy like dwarf culture thing, but also has the subtext of the friends and their friendship and stuff. Just makes me excited. So I think that, but I don't know. I could be persuaded, Nick.
I mean, that's a good one. I mean, especially too, it's like a different type of badass. And I like that we're getting some dwarven badass. I mean, obviously Elrond participates, but I'm just thinking about when I was also a teenager watching The Two Towers, and I used to skip my Two Towers DVD just to get to Helm's Deep so I could watch Legolas surf and shoot orcs. But I think for me, I mean, it's a Rondir. Him fighting the Chihuahua warg was just so sick, dude. I mean, when he
The
leaps
chains and stuff.
he utilizes the chains in such a cool way, and he like chops down the canopy so the orcs are exposed to the sun. So sick, man. That whole scene is just amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. I there's quite a bit. And if you, I mean, we don't need to ruin things for people that don't know what's going to happen if they are, but like when you see how those action scenes are going, and then you think, oh, and even like the flashback scenes where you see like dragons battling the eagles in the first episode, and you know what kind of battles are going to take place in the next 5 seasons, you just go, oh, come on. Oh, come on. Yeah. Bath time with Vaughn, I agree. I like the warg. I was like, this is what I'm talking about. And when its head pops through in episode 4, when you get the what's his name? What's the elf's name?
Arondir.
Arondir talking to Adar is like you're like, who are you? What are you? Right? And then the warg jumps through. I got scared 2 of the 3 times I watched that scene. It was like, wow. Like, oh,
Dude,
that is not Beverly Hills Chihuahua. You know what I mean?
No, it is not. That's like East LA, dude. That's like East LA Chihuahua right there.
Yeah. So if there was a that's raw category, what's involved in applying the term that's raw to a scene from the first 4 episodes?
Man, I think there's a character who I'd say is a raw character right now who hasn't lived up to his rawness is a Lendil. Like, we are going to see, like, he just looks raw. His armor, his voice, his the way he carries himself, and the dude is just like, he's a warrior. He's a lord of Numenor. I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, now how raw is that old creepy old guy that talks to Theo about Sauron? Because and what's up with that? I want to know what you think about this, because that is not something I have any familiarity with. A sword that looks like some kind of like dark artifact sword hilt that sucks blood out and then leaves the mark. Like, is this connected to the whole blood oath thing? Like, that's the only reference I have in my head. But you know more. What do you think's going on in the search for the hilt?
Yeah, it is. There's a whole bunch of things, because these are kind of a device artifacts that are invented by the show that's taking us somewhere. And so that part of the world, which is where Theo is and Bronwyn and Arondir, is Mordor before it's Mordor, basically.
Right.
And so the Easterlings are people who have been in league with Sauron since the First Age. And I think that some of the descendants of the First Age Easterlings are some of the folks who become ring wraiths. Now that's something I'm a little fuzzy on. I think some what Tolkien calls the Black Numenorians, which are Numenorians that betray Numenor, and the Second Age also, I think, become ring wraiths. And so I think they're taking us there. I think that there's going to be some descendants of Easterling royalty that are going to be only they are going to be able to use these swords. And of course they have like a wraith like thing, like in the movies when they disappear.
Yeah,
this time they reappear. And so that's kind of my thing. And I think Theo is a secret bloodline person.
Ooh, so you have to be in the bloodline for it to work.
Yeah,
because then you get like the little mark, and then it's kind of, like now you're going to be worried in summer. You're like, hey, these guys are wearing long sleeves in the summer over one arm. And it happens to be the one they hold a sword with. What's up with that? Matching tats of the Dark Lord. And see, I saw that and I thought of like how the like the mark from Harry Potter. I was like,
yeah.
I
think there's definitely some parallels there for sure.
But I'm in the middle of reading it with the middle child currently. So
Harry Potter.
Yeah. Which
book are you on?
Goblet of Fire, chapter 14. That's where we're at right now. You just had the two other houses show up, and the cups about to get pulled out when she fell asleep 10 minutes before we started. The of course, Americans are worried about the right to bear arms in the summer. Oh, that's a comment of the day. Okay, so I have a couple questions, and I thought I would organize ones that got sent in based on the different plot lines. And so which one do you want to go to first, Nick?
Let's do the Harfoots first. Let's give the Harfoots a little first. Let's give them a little treatment here.
All right. And Harfoots here, the ancestors of the hobbits. Not a lot to go on in Lord of the Rings and the appendices. So there's a lot of the big picture being filled in by the showrunners and such. You see there, and you getting the introduction of two good friends. One of which whole family died in a mudslide, it appears.
Apparently.
Wow, and is the only one left. And you're like, wow. And then she's now at the back of the line because of this attending to the stranger. So when you think of the Harfoots, one of the questions that came in said there's so many little parts of the Harfoots where you go, oh, okay, we're meeting hobbits. But then there's the obvious ones. You mentioned some earlier. We're not. Do you think that we'll see a genuine evolution towards the hobbits over the season, or do you think they'll remain the kind of caravanning, traveling kind?
I think that we are probably going to see them settle somewhere at some point and look more like the traditional hobbits we're familiar with. It's just I feel like Jack just said I look like I'm in a Kazakhstan prison, and I feel like you're saying I resemble Borat a little bit, and I am resisting the millennial urge to say my wife, and I will resist. But yeah, I think so. And at some point too, during the Harfoots, this is in the third age. So I mean, but that's what they're doing. They're trying to give us stuff. So eventually in the third age, they meet the other hobbits, the Fallowhides and the the other one, the third one.
Because in the section on the hobbits, you get these brief mentions of kind of before they settled the three different groups.
Right.
in Lord of the Rings.
And
Yeah.
so the Harfoots are in the Shire and Bree. Oh, the Stores. Thank you. Bath Time with Fawn. And so I think that the Fallowhides are, um, they're like dwarves. No, Harfoots are like dwarves a little bit, and then I think the Stores are like the water people, and I think that Gollum actually is descended from like the Stores. So,
Yeah. Do you think like in the middle of season 5, you'll get Smeagol killing his buddy, like at the very end, like it's like the coda?
Interesting.
I only thought of
don't-
it because we have the suggestion of the Shire arriving in the Shire as a closing shot, right? Because there's quite a
Yeah.
bit of distance from where the Harfoots are to getting to the Shire. But if we get the if like, you know, it goes to the post credit scene, you know, Marvel style, is the recovery of the ring, you know, just be like,
How
people like,
awesome
"Oh."
would that be to contrast with Frodo leaving to the Grey Havens too and arriving? Because for Tolkien, the Shire is like a little mini heaven on earth. Like, it's obviously the Shire and it's on the world and it's decaying just like everything else in Tolkien's world. But I mean, it's like a little Lorien, you know, in and of itself. And so that would be a sick thing to be like, this is home. The hobbits are coming home type of a deal.
Yeah. So so if you think of the hobbits as in many ways, this is the liminal period of their identity, and knowing the role the story of Israel played in inspiring Tolkien, and the kind of notion of home being so dear. This is the kind of the time of wondering before you get to the home that was promised that you may not have been to before. And similarly, and most historians point this out, the concept of the nation, like Israel as a nation, was invented after the the story gets like put backwards, right? So it's the Exodus that makes the people. And so if you look at all the textual evidence of the Hebrew scriptures, it's pulling together narratives from a whole bunch of different people that came to be identified as Israel and then woven together in exile in Babylon. So like they're knowing that these different groups ultimately form the hobbits that we have attachment to in a home and stuff. You can see some of those threads that are, you know, I can project all sorts of things on.
No, you're 100% right. You know, it's kind of funny.
Oh,
I think I have it
100% right.
noted.
Well,
Yeah, I think
what time signature are we at here? Okay.
Yeah, we're done. Complete. We've analyzed everything. No, I've had that thought too about. I think there's a great book called Tolkien and His Sources, and there's a guy named Jason Fisher that talks about Tolkien's interaction with biblical sources because he had to he translated the book of Jonah, I think, for the Jerusalem Bible translation. So anyway, so Tolkien was familiar with Old Testament texts. And so I think that there is a lot of inspiration, not just for the dwarves in Jewish culture, but just even some of the way that cultures come together across Middle Earth reflects a lot of the way that Israel's history is told in that retroactive way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we don't have to skip over to Numenor yet because we got to talk about the stranger. But like the idea that a kingdom loses confidence in the story of its founding, and then there is one last king who wants to retrieve the old ways and the Hall of Lore and this kind of thing, then you know and then things go downhill after that and ultimately leads to the division of Israel and Judea into separate states and all that kind of stuff, which is in the Hebrew Bible. Like you see that kind of tension here, where what does it mean to be a community that's uniquely blessed among all other people? Why? Because you were faithful in a particular difficult time. And then that you lose the blessing because you lose confidence in the one that gave the gifts, right? So like, and you see that playing out so much in the story. And like many a blessed and chosen people, what ultimately breaks it apart doesn't come from the outside, but it comes from within. Only Numenor can destroy Numenor. And then it sets off, right? Like with the, do we want the elves coming over here? Like, which it is funny for people that haven't read it before. Like, that's not something that was invented to be politically correct.
Right.
Like, that's actually how it goes in the book. No projection needed. But sorry, that was a long aside to ask about the stranger, Nick, before we leave the Hardfoots.
No, the stranger is, I just have no idea, man. This last episode was just threw me off, especially when they do a little flash and you see the stranger having the same scar as Theo. And, I think I gave you my top power ranking as Sauron, Gandalf, Blue Wizards. So I think I've heard people talk. So
Tom
Sauron, Blue
Bombadil.
Wizards, Tom Bombadil, Gandalf. And I've even heard people say a Balrog before. And that is interesting. That after this episode, I was a little more open to the Balrog concept because they're Maya and they can technically shapeshift. I don't think it is. Lorne, Balrog, and Eärendil. Interesting, Eärendil. I think that it's Sauron, but I think I have doubled down on the Sauron. At first, I was like, after the third episode, I was like, no, it is. It's definitely a blue wizard. I was like, it's a blue wizard of Gandalf. I'm wrong. And now this episode, I'm like, I'm thinking it's Sauron, dude.
Yeah. Well, I know the chat here is having themselves a good time, but a Balrog makes a lot of sense if it's to start up Mount Doom and the Darkening of Mordor.
Yeah.
Luke, and now there is, they've mentioned this in the show, but the idea that Sauron doesn't always take the same form, that is, but is that also true in the Legendarium about Balrogs? Do they form shift in that way?
Not traditionally, no, but a lot of times Maya are not confined to their corporeal forms. And so like Melian in the First Age, she is a Maya who marries Thingol and is the mother of Luthien. And she ends up leaving Middle Earth at some point. But because she chooses to become like a human in human form or elf form or what have you, she's confined to her mortal body. But I don't know if Balrogs are in like a corporeal form or if they're in like a hybrid, or if they're just like spirit demon. I have no idea.
But we do know they don't have wings. That's one thing.
Yeah, no wings.
Been established. And I want to give a shout out to Gage, who showed up because it's on my stream, saying I thought we were joins here to talk theology. Here's Lord of the Rings talk. 2 hours ago, there was a separate stream. Diana Butler-Bass and I did a lot of theology. You can go check that one out. But I have to say, don't challenge me to figure out ways of talking theology while doing Tolkien, because it's completely possible. Yeah,
we'd be here for 3 hours, dude.
Well, that's why we do it. We're doing it regularly because
so true.
Okay, so next, let's where are we going next?
Where do you think? I picked the first one. Tell me where.
Okay, I want to talk about the orcs.
Yes.
Okay, I know we haven't talked much about episode 4, but you told me you love the orcs coming out in this episode. I did too. So you tell me why, like, the orcs in this show are so thrilling.
Man, they're so cool. Just like everything else. One of the things I just think of is just the unpacking and the creation of culture across the different races. And like when you were talking about Disa singing, that was like my number 3 for my Junk moment. And like the way that, because the dwarves are secretive, we don't get a lot of their culture in Tolkien's writings. And so to see that fleshed out is so cool. And similar with the orcs, where we have the different clothes, and orcs don't like sun. And we don't really see that in the Peter Jackson films. I mean, the Uruk-hai, right, that take Merry and Pippin, they're hybrid, so they can handle the sun. But the other orcs shouldn't be able to be as well adjusted to sunlight. And so we get to really see that. And we see the clothing, and especially with the arrival of Adar and him interacting with the orcs in the 4th episode rather, where, you know, there's this kind of ritualistic loving mercy when he ends, you know, the suffering of the dying orc. And the orc is wearing an elven chest plate, because for those who don't know, orcs are corrupted elves. And so, which Adar is himself an elf, presumably. And so just to see that there's more to orcs than just like arrow fodder for badass elves.
Yeah. So like, I love that scene. I find the ability to humanize in this a lot of the groups and characters that in some sense in the trilogy movies are just people to get defeated, you know.
Right.
Like the orcs, like, and in the books are more human. You see more of orc culture in the books. You get, when it goes to the Easterlings, Sam's comments about you know, I don't think they think they're basically, you know, evil in their story. They have a home and they have a reason they ended up here, kind of thing, with this moment of humanizing the other. And it's intimately connected, like John Garth talked about when he was on, to, you know, the experience of being part of World War One, then being overcome with the amount of death and destruction, and realizing everyone has a story where it makes sense to be there, and yet the event is just, you know, absurd. And so I found that scene, the ritualization that's taking place at death, really compelling. In the same way, right, the Sutherlings, getting to know them through the tension between the different elves at the tower about, oh, they're just the ancestors from thousands of years ago who sided on the wrong side of the battle, kind of thing. Like it's spending so much time in those stories, giving more complex backgrounds that actually fill the meaning up, when you go look, when people, you know, go to then just engage the story of Lord of the Rings. I wonder, though, in that scene you mentioned the armor, the orc that Adar hastens his death, and they pull the armor off, and they're using black speech, which we don't really know much about. So I don't know if there's been at least internet translations based on what we know, but it looked like the armor, it was similar to the elves at the tower, in that it had the face of the Green Man on it.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know if it was taken armor, or if they're implying that the elves that ultimately became those orcs are, you know, essentially kin with the ones that are in the tower, right? So because none of the other elves we've met in the show have that coloring or the face of the Green Man on there. But you think of all the Green Man imagery, especially knowing Tolkien's background and familiarity with it, that it's a deeply nature reverential depiction. And it didn't look different than the other ones. Anyway, do you have thoughts of that? Because I noticed that and was like, I don't know which way this goes. If it was taken, but then they take it off him in this ritual way. And I'm like,
yeah, you know,
they're ultimately taking out all the trees around the area.
Yeah, I didn't even think about, you know, potentially taking it, because here's two things that I think about that I think they could do. They've been doing a lot of Peter Jackson callbacks, and so I could see that kind of that taking off of the elven armor to be similar to like a callback a little bit to how the orcs take away like Frodo's mithril shirt in the tower, and maybe in just a more ritualistic sense of how they revere things that they take and recognize or something. But I kind of like the idea of that being an original piece, and those orcs basically sharing kinship with these elves, which, I mean, there's so many different types of elves, but all, as far as we know, orcs aren't limited. I mean, as many types of elves there are and men, that's how many orcs there are, and plus maybe some hybrids or something. And so I wonder, with Adar being this elven fatherly figure to the orcs, and even the way that he's treating Arondir, if, I mean, obviously Arondir went to give a message, right? That's he right. He got sent to give a message.
Yeah, he got sent a message. That's why he let him go.
Yeah, like I think there's more to that. I think there's probably spreading the message of fear and corrupting, but I wonder if there is a sense of like trying to get Arondir to realize some truths to then be with, his potential kin.
Mm-hmm. What did you make of Adar's efforts? It says clear the scene cuts out so you don't hear the whole conversation. The second time I thought, oh, okay, there's conversation that doesn't happen once he goes, I'm going to send you the message, and then it cuts straight ahead and you hear the message secondhand. But
Right.
A lot of times hearing a message secondhand doesn't ultimately give you the whole message. So there's that bit. But also he says, like there's so many lies that so, and they've been told so long, like even the rocks and trees believe them, and it's going to require a whole new earth, and I'm no god yet, and I'm like, oh, this is escalated.
Yeah.
Right, like, and knowing that they're in the territory, right, like that when we see Mordor in the Third Age in the movies, that's where you are, like, and in the little village, you can see the volcano behind. I didn't notice that till later, and anyway, but like, what do you think's entailed in Adar's kind of like depiction there of, like that vision of becoming of God, of needing to reorder nature all the way down to like a new nature in order to really accomplish what he's going at.
Yeah. Oh man, there's multiple times throughout I guess more in you get more of Sauron and Morgoth's treachery and lies, in the way that they try to lure people into doing their will, in like the Silmarillion and such. And there are multiple heroes that Morgoth captures or Sauron captures and promises to give them things that are extremely dear to them, or at least resonates with their worldview. And then in a twisted way, Morgoth and Sauron fulfill their promises, but in a way that's, what they actually meant, which is an evil intention, which is usually death or death of somebody else. And I mean, even with Glaurung the dragon as well. And Smaug, you see that too in The Hobbit. And so I think that Adar is going to kind of serve as this treacherous dragon-like character, this corrupted person who has bought into the lies himself. I mean, he thinks he's going to be a god, right? And he believes the truth. So he's kind of like I'm almost thinking like a fundamentalist and like a crazy cult, like, adjacent church who, is kind of down on his luck, has nothing left, gets sucked into this community, is given all these things and a purpose and believes it, and is being used and manipulated for higher ends.
Yeah. And so in that sense, he could be, a true believer, because it's in many ways, probably an elf from the first stage. Yeah. And has been there through this whole time of regrouping, right? Following the map / sign of Sauron to go down into more, future Mordor, prepare the way in a sense. And you wonder, how duped is he getting? Like, is he going to fetch Sauron's Horcruxes and getting the hilt, or who knows what else, these kind of things, like, oh, we got to bring these things together, because they're like exactly how I don't know how not to ruin thing. So we know Sauron has to get embodied in a particular way to end up fulfilling part of the storyline that's already been signaled, and then leave that location. So Sauron has to be embodied probably by the end of the second season, right? In order to get through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so what brings it? Like, it could be some, a sword hilt that sucked enough blood, or I don't know. Do you have any, is there anything specific about how Sauron comes to take a definite form? Because I know he changes forms. Oh, he was fair and that kind of stuff. But
one of the things that they hint in, so this is more for, I think it's more emphasized with Morgoth more than Sauron, but the way that Morgoth and Sauron kind of keep control of all their emissaries is that all of the orcs and their servants have a instillment of their kind of being, and so they kind of even orcs and leaders in Balrogs are sort of like Horcruxes, where their beings kind of scattered everywhere. And so the good thing is that there's a long arm to reach to keep people in check and all those sorts of things, but it makes Morgoth and Sauron less powerful in their own body, and their embodiment is less powerful. So I wonder at this point if Sauron's been gone for a period of time, and all that's left is kind of like these little people servants and hiding. And now, like you were talking about with these blood swords, that those quite possibly could play a role in kind of rejuvenating Sauron into his former splendor.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about it. You know what's fun is that you get to, like, because it comes out week to week, because they're going to get 50 episodes and can take their time. They get to do it in ways that weaves the stuff you kind of know with new characters, and there's like mysteries, and you get to have these conversations that in a month we'll be like, oh, that was completely ridiculous. I can't believe I thought that. Versus,
it's so true.
Like if it's going bit by bit. But I have to say, if this goes well and they're going to make a 50 episode version of Lord of the Rings proper that goes through the whole thing, and it's made at this quality, but you don't need to invent anything extra. You just need to take your time. I'll buy 3 Amazon Prime. I'll get it for each device. Like, I want to go hang out with Tom Bombadil. I do.
I'll gift him to my, our super lefty friends who are just very logically consistent. And they're like, you know what? I don't buy from corporations. I'm like, you don't have to, but you need to see this.
No, I'm not saying you have to use the delivery. I'm just saying, come on. But I'm sure you can bootleg it,
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think Bezos is hurting. Okay. So before we run out of time and stuff, how about we got to go to the elves? Elfish storyline. Now, and this is the one of all of them, you have the most information when it comes from like actual text, and the most information that of characters that are present, that we have things we aren't allowed to use if you're the showrunners.
Right.
And so I think it's definitely the trickiest one, right? For people that are text familiar. And so when you look at it big picture, what are you thinking?
Oh, I mean, the elves are I think they're doing an amazing job. And I think it is because, like you said, that's what most of the writing's about. I mean, the most fleshed out languages that we have are 2 Elvish languages. Those are almost like complete vocabularies and grammar that Tolkien created. And so when we've got writings and material culture and tapestries and art and all of those things, and we've got one of my favorite things too is like when Elrond kind of talks to Durin in the 4th episode and talks about Durin's, kind of grief with his father. And Elrond talks about his dad, Eärendil, who he's really never known, and how they've fleshed that out like on an emotional level is so cool. It's a nod to super fans, but it's just so good in the emotion part. And I think that's the part that will be cool, is that you get a lot of emotion with certain characters, but these characters in different situations with elves that you don't get to see the emotional impacts or how those friendships are formed. And we get to see that fleshed out is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I was rather impressed at the stepping up to the line of getting to things they can talk about. Like, you couldn't show a giant spider taking down the trees, but like the role that plays, you could capture. Anyway, there are like these little things. But yeah, the other thing about oh my, all right, this is wild. Here we go. Imagine if the 3 stories are all happening hundreds of years apart. And that's the twist in the season finale. So I guess we have multiple meteors.
Yes.
The multiple meteors are different instantiations of Sauron. And at the end of the season, you realize they're on different timelines. And these are all the little seeds of Sauron getting sown.
I literally just thought this yesterday, where I was like, what if we are in different parts of the timeline? And so they're messing with us, talking about this convergence thing, and we're going to get the different stories and how they culminate at some point. I don't know if it's happening, but I feel like it would be a nice little twist.
Like, if you wanted to get everyone to rewatch the whole thing right after the last episode comes out, do that, because they would have spent enough time. Like, it's not going to mess anything up. And then they're like, oh, how they do the reveal. Like, let's say the Adar shows up in Numenor, no scars on the face in season 1.
Oh, and he might have been one of the elves at the beginning, like who was still from Valinor and was hanging out. Dude.
Oh,
I don't know. I mean, I think these are, that's like you were just saying, how what they've done is that we have familiarity with the show and we know what's going to happen with big plot points, but because there's so much gaps as far as like how things happen, like we get to theorize because we really don't know how they're going to accomplish the ends.
Yeah. All right. Well, I that just sounds fun. The internet would break, right? If it got
I think
to the end.
haters would be silenced. I think the end, and they were like, look at
Don't
all these
challenge
stories.
Haters to hate. They're like, they're like, so now Sauron's been multiple races. What are they going to get upset about that?
How was that politically correct?
How? Yeah. Oh man, what's funny is I get all sorts of free life advice from people that don't like things about me on the internet. And for the longest time, I would get the most any time in the year when I'm doing a class, like a class that involves like Black theology, liberation theology, like religious critiques of capitalism. That triggers certain things. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna send you some hate mail. But there's a whole different kind of commentary when someone just notices that you like Tolkien and aren't a Christo-fascist.
Yeah.
And like, there's like, let me just tell you something else, Trip. And I'm like, well, whoa.
That's some niche hatred too.
Yeah.
That's some niche hatred.
I mean, I understand if you're like deeply convinced that Jesus is an upper middle class white Republican that loves Donald Trump, like not liking a number of things I do. But
yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so let's each pick one more thing we haven't talked about that we want to make sure we talk about the halftime report, and then we're going to go with our what's your prediction looking at halftime, where we're going.
Okay. I'm going to ask you because I want you, because you've been talking about, I feel like since we've been doing this whole thing, that you've been really stoked on Durin and Elrond's friendship and now how this is exploring. So I want to, why don't we talk about the dwarves specifically?
Well, I noticed this and I texted you this, and on my third watch, I'm not sure Durin the Third is real. This is crazy, but since Bath Time with Vaughn has the threefold Sauron revealed at the end of it, what if that big climactic conversation between Elrond, where he tells the story of his dad, like being given this honor, and I see him every night because he ultimately, is in the sky lighting, but you never get to talk to him again. He tells that, and what Durin's struggling with is the grief of the loss of his father, that there's not actually two Durins alive at the same time. And what projected wrestling with grief memory Daddy Durin the Third tells Durin the Fourth is, when you put on the crown, all of us are there with you and we're always there. He's coming to grips with what it means to stand in that lineage and things. And that's why we get that creeped out. Like, is his dad dead sitting on the stone? Or, in the chair, the stone chair? What if he is dead? What if it's like a I see dead people moment, but it's like processing your dad grief? Because so every storyline has a father-son relationship that's running deep. That one is Father Durin's, and then you have Elrond, and then they're friending each other. And I'm like, oh, because the only other scene where other people are present, no one talks to Durin the Third when they're opening the chest.
Yes.
And I think to myself, like, if I knew someone was going to give me a hard time about two Durins, and you knew they're going to start complaining, and then you learn that no, it was actually setting up how an elf and a dwarf shared grief over the death of their father, or the distancing of their father, who's present but not in the same way. They work through that grief together by being friends across difference, like together. And I'm like, I don't know, it should be true. I don't know if it is, but
I'm almost convinced that's what's going to happen. That is too good.
And I've rewatched it all. I cannot come up with a way where anyone else acknowledges or talks like Durin the Third's there.
Right.
So who knows? But either way, it is so one, just seeing dwarf culture, getting the music, the discovery of Mithril, the pledging on the wall, sending him home with a little bit of it. That was dangerous. I just love dwarves, and I love a dwarf elvish friendship. And I'm like, oh, I'm all here for it. But if Durin the Third is a ghost of grief, then yeah.
I mean, this is the halftime show, so this is I feel like this is like placing your bets, and I feel like you're just going to cash out, like the freaking Moria DraftKings is just going to shower you in Mithril, dude.
Like, what kind of odds can I get on there is never two Dorins at the same time? Because none of his kids are named Durin. He's yelled their names.
Right.
Look, if it is a name that passes down, wouldn't he have called one of his kids Durin the Fifth?
It's true.
So I'm just saying. Anyway,
I love this so much, dude.
If it's not true, it should be. They got to re-edit. Anyway, that's what I'm excited about. I'm like, ooh. The other thing about the dwarves that is totally cool is their masks. Like the mask, dwarf masks are awesome. That it can flip up. That their mask has a beard built in. I'm like, that's awesome. They're just little things about the dwarves, and I want to watch these dwarves in a fight. They look like you're going to get a dwarf fight, and it's not going to be Hobbit style dwarf cheesiness. Like they're going to get nasty, and there's going to be orcs coming close. And you've seen orcs; they're leveled up. These are much more ferocious orcs than you see. But those dwarves, they break rocks for fun.
Yeah,
he can. May take Elrond half a day to scale the walls. Doran's like a couple hours, just a couple hours. Spends you all day, elf. Like you want to see what happens in close range melee with just smashing some stuff up with axes and maces. Oh, just saying. I want to see one of those little warg chihuahuas like charge at Durin, and he just
pulls a Gimli and just snaps his neck immediately, like no problem.
Yeah, I'm ready for that. But yes, and Mark asked questions. Yeah, the Durins, it is reincarnate. They understood it as reincarnation?
That's right. They understood it to be that way.
But you don't. There's not been a character in the know in the Legendarium affirm the reality of the reincarnation. Is that right?
That's correct. After I think the paragraph in the Silmarillion where it says that, I think because it's written from the Elvish perspective, they say that I think it says like, for the dwarves have many mysterious ways that they have not revealed, or they refuse to reveal to anyone. And you're like, dang, that's cool.
Yeah, because you don't get like even in the scene in Lord of the Rings where Gimli goes to when they come out after Gandalf has died, and they go to pause, even though not very long, at like the pool or wherever the next Durin's supposed to show up at.
Yeah.
There's not like you have like you don't have like Legolas go, yep. Like we know, I remember the other two Durins, and they were reincarnations. You don't get Gandalf doesn't affirm it as the case, so it's like one of those, like there are all these little mysteries of dwarves. So how it works, you don't really know. You just know the story the elves knew about what the dwarves said. It's like they reporting what they're.
That you talked about even with the ghost of Durin too, because the Mirror is what the body of water is called, and they specifically mention it in that episode. And so I wonder if they specifically mentioned the Mirror to talk about the reflection, of Durin, and his dad. And
yeah, he's dead. There's no Durin the Third. Now I'm glad we have that all wrapped up. Well done, team. Well done.
We need to send that stuff. We need to save it here, and then you need to sell that to all the other famous Tolkien podcasts and be like, if y'all want some clicks, we got your theory right here.
Yeah, Mark says that. Here's the quote. That they say also that the seven fathers of the dwarves returned to live again in their own kin and to bear once more their ancient names, of whom Durin was the most renowned. So, that's a beautiful way of getting at that whole complication of grief and picking up the crown and come on, this is too good. Even if it's not true, it's fun to talk about. We'll find out when we're hanging out at beer camp at the end of the season. I bet we find out.
Yeah, I think so.
If we find out the end of the season that there are 3 different timelines going on and they each have a Sauron instantiation, then I don't.
That'd be wild.
That's wild. Yeah. All right. Now you get to tell me where we're going last. What's your last halftime report, Nick? What does your futuring hat have on? What do you think's happening in the second half here? Where are we going?
I think that I don't know if I brought it up last week about because we haven't really given Galadriel, Elendil, or Halbrand any love in this episode, and I think that we're really going to see maybe not the next episode because we spent the past 2 episodes with them and we haven't spent any time with the Harfoots, especially the last episode. But I think that, like, especially with Halbrand, I think that Halbrand is Bronwyn's, long lost lover, father of Theo, and that Halbrand is one of the Easterling kings. Unless the timeline thing is true, then it's incorrect. In that case, Halbrand and the stranger could be Sauron. But I really like the idea of Halbrand being an Easterling royalty, and then having Theo as a son. And people talked about that towards the end, which is, oh man, I don't know, which this still could, I think, maybe work in the timeline, is that Halbrand, it becomes the leader of what is the army of the dead in the Lord of the Rings. And he leads and he breaks his oath to Isildur because his son Theo is the Witch King, or is a wraith, or he's facing him. And so that's the reason why Halbrand has to break his oath, is because he can't kill his own son.
Ooh.
And I think that we'll at least see more of that develop. Yeah.
I'm excited. All right. Now, before we finish, I'm going to hit the draw button on the book giveaway.
Ooh, let's go, baby.
Let's see. All right. Now, I don't recognize either of these names, which means it's not me. Cindy Smart and Greg Bruner. Cindy Smart, Greg Bruner. I'm going to email you in just a few minutes. You should respond to the email. If you don't, I promise Nick is okay holding the books for you until you respond.
Oh yeah,
or
I will
indefinitely.
Read them all. Yeah, I'll give you a month.
But Cindy Smart, Greg Bruner, you just won the Tolkien Head mega giveaway, and it is exciting because I just moved mine, but the folio edition of Lord of the Rings just looks so good. Here, I'll show you my see it over there right at the end
left. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was using it to set my computer on, but I switched it out when I'm recording. But yeah, I mean, you take that and then like Tolkien nerd collection out the wazoo, but that folio edition is just so good. It also smells good. And I know,
imagining.
I just sniffed it. I sniffed it and was like, it smells like it's good. Just like reading it. Anyway, hey, if that you return the email, that'd be good. And when you return it, you should give me a mailing address because it's easier to send books that way. But if you just want a PDF of the folio edition and want me to give Nick the physical copy, then you can always do that.
I will be forever grateful, and I will fulfill the oath for you in whatever battle that you need.
Yes. Well, thank you all. Those of you that have hung out live, those of you listen later, this is a lot of blast. We're having fun. Next week, Brian Zahn will be here. It's going to be fun. Donna Bowman, who doesn't who doesn't want a book trip spin sniffing? No, the version the winner gets is not my copy. It'll be wrapped in cellophane or whatever it gets delivered. I ordered them, and when it arrived, I just ordered another one because I wanted to open one and realized there was zero chance I was giving them away and not having one. And yeah, you know how that is. Maybe you don't, but if you've ever held the folio set, parting with it also seems like a bad idea.
Yeah,
it's too precious.
I mean, that's like, I'm not gonna lie, you're doing the Bibliotheca giveaway, and the last time you did a Bibliotheca giveaway, I did not win, and I bought me a set
Oh,
and
they're awesome.
oh, they're beautiful books, dude. I mean, when I heard the interview on like the guy who did it, and that
Mhm.
they got like page makers in Germany or something, right? Who make it from like stone. I'm
Yeah,
like, oh my God, so awesome.
yeah. Adam is hilarious. He's sponsoring the sword drill at Theology Beer Camp.
So
Um,
awesome.
you know a fun bit about this, Nick? Just between me and you.
Tell me.
You've opened a bibliotheca before. One
Yeah.
of the things that's other on top of the doing a translation that is intentionally more literal and formatted and such to match the kind of literature it is.
Right.
It also does not have chapters and verses in it
Yeah.
because the actual originals don't. So at Theology Beer Camp, when you are trying to find a passage as quickly as possible and you don't know this, you're going to open a Bible that does not have chapters and verses looking for a passage.
Oh shit,
And the
dude.
order of the Bible in Bibliotheca, the books, is based on the actual order in Torah and then the New Testament's order as it is, as opposed to the Gentile ordering of the Hebrew Bible. So it goes like law, prophets, writings, the wisdom lit. So I'm thoroughly amused by what's going to happen when some people have made it to the end of all the different quiz games and then are having to find a verse in a 5-volume set with no chapters and verses.
It's so good because I was a swords drill master, and I'm not gonna lie. When you posted that was gonna happen, I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill it." And now, I
You can
might
practice.
have
You
to.
can
Yeah, that's
practice.
right.
But because we have trophies for the winner,
Ah, yes.
full of irony. Just to clarify, in case someone was only here for the Tolkien, um, sword drill is a non-violent battle using the Bible in certain parts of American evangelicalism. And so you can win the trophy with the cross and open Bible and prayer, hands on a American flag shaft trophy that says, "I slaughtered all foes with the sword of the Lord at Theology Beer Camp." And just saying.
I haven't really interacted with Mason Menega before,
Uh-huh.
but I want to go head to head with him, and I want to win.
Okay.
So
Well, if you two dear people want to win, you can drop that the code Tolkien and get $50 off your ticket to Theology Beer Camp, where unlike the Prancing Pony, all the drinks are included in your presence. You don't have to pay, and they come in pints. And it's gonna be some amazing options. So thank you all for hanging out. It's been a blast. We will have fun next week and the next few weeks. And then hang out in person. Be great. So we'll see how the halftime report turns out. I'm optimistic. Nick.
me too. You're gonna get lots of mithril.
I am. And so, like, if Doran the Third is dead, and there are 3 different timelines of Saurons, then this particular live stream will get canonized.
Yeah,
Yeah. So just saying.
we'll put it on the internet. The theory originated here. Time stamped everything. Boom.
All right. Talk to y'all later.